with Scout. Ate the glasses. Did I send you that?
Yeah.
That's how my day started. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Minnesotans. Once again, a thank you to the press corps for working on this pooling procedure to make sure that we have social distancing and sharing questions with one another. You're going to hear from Commissioner Malcolm. Once again, you're going to see that Minnesota has started potentially now up the climb that we thought would come, because we've had about 5 days of triple digits, and even though the testing at this point is not increased dramatically, those are still starting to show up. And of course, our sympathies to the families. We've lost 9 more of our neighbors. You're also going to hear about our plans to procure the PPE, and you're going to hear from some of our private sector partners in just a bit. I'll be talking about ECOLAB CEO and Chair Doug Baker and the work he's doing with Commissioner Alice Roberts-Davis in securing that. And then we will update you on the situation at the Worthington Plant, which we'll have Commissioner Leppink from the Department of Labor and Industry and Commissioner Peterson from Agriculture, because there's a lot of intersections there in addition to the Department of Health. So thank you all for that. And once again, Minnesotans, I would just tell you, thank you for doing what was asked of you. We are still maintaining that ability to push the curve out, flatten it a little bit, which was a positive. And my guarantee to you is if I asked the sacrifices of you, that we would build the teams necessary to produce the hospital beds and the critical equipment necessary to weather a wave of COVID-19 related hospitalizations. And we are on our way to doing that. There's more work to be done. And then also talked about how do we smartly put a Minnesota model together that allows us to do smart epidemiological testing, tracing, and isolation, and put together teams of people who are able to figure out what are those industries that we can bring back in a safe manner, making sure that we don't get in a situation while JBS was open, while Smithfield were open, they still are not immune from having clusters of infections that in the long run, if your workforce can't come to work, it doesn't matter whether you're open or closed by state stay-at-home orders, the facts remain the same. I spent the morning talking to many of our state's business leaders, with Charlie Weaver and the Minnesota Business Partnership, and then spoke directly to one of our state's largest retailers about what it's going to take. And what I'm really encouraged about is the thinking and the innovation that's going in. I think most of these retailers and businesses understand they're going to have to change the way business is done for about the next 18 months. They're going to have to do that regardless of what a stay-at-home order looks like, because people are naturally understanding we're going to have to social distance, and their shopping and their retail buying experience is going to change dramatically. As I keep saying, very few people are going to go in and try on clothes right now, whether a retail store is open or not. And they're trying to figure out, and we're seeing some of the folks who are thinking this through, what will that experience look like for a customer's perspective as they walk through the door? They're talking to people about what it's going to take to get them back in. And I think that's incredibly helpful. And I think as we write these plans and the protocols for reopening Minnesota, that type of thinking is what has to be a part of it. And I think it brings me to my point about this team that's out acquiring personal protective equipment that are in part of this supply chain stream. That Minnesota's advantages, as I've said often, are a very robust healthcare system, a very robust and well-documented public health sector that is renowned for the work they do, a business ethic of philanthropy and community responsibility that helps creating public-private partnerships easier. And when we've started back in March, and I put together the team around aggressively going after personal protective equipment, we looked inside state government when we brought Commissioner Roberts-Davis over from administration, and then we looked at companies across Minnesota, both big and small, who had expertise with this. One of the first folks we called I called Doug Baker, who's over at ECOLAB, a company that has a little bit of knowledge in what it takes to keep things clean and to keep food processing and things neat and businesses running in a time when you need to decontaminate in a very fast manner, but also someone who runs supply chains globally with international companies and understands that now, because of the situation we were in, Minnesota was competing against surrounding states. We were competing against other nations to try and acquire that. And so you're going to hear from Doug and Alice here in just a little bit, and the team that they put put together. But I think the stories, and ECOLAB is one of them. There are many others, and I want to call out a few of them. Of course, C.H. Robinson, Toro, Patterson, 3M, and Mayo. And there's numerous others. But one of the things is a lot of what these folks did is pro bono wise, as they were shutting down their operations, they were asking how they could help the state. And what they did is they gave us some folks over to help us. One of those was Jill Wyant. I want to get her title right. She's Executive Vice President and President of Global Regions. Jill is an expert over at ECOLAB in procurement and supply chain management, and she's working with us pro bono as part of the team that's helping Minnesota. So I hope Minnesotans know this is an all-state effort. This is public-private partnerships. This is the best of our private sector. Some of the most successful companies in the world have given their people to come over to help the state do this. So you'll hear a little bit with them on the Critical Care Supply Working Group. They've been at it now for several weeks, and I think like anything in this pandemic, we have days where things go better than others, but all geared towards that idea that there will be critical equipment when needed. There will be an increase in the personal protective equipment so that we can expand out to further protect people throughout society, and that at the same time we're ramping up that the supplies inside the hospitals. So I'm going to have them come up in just a minute, and then we're going to update you on the Worthington situation. I think most of you by now in the media, folks listening today, is that JBS, the company that runs one of the largest Midwest pork producing plants, employs about 2,000 people in Worthington. Obviously, a critical linchpin of the economic and social fabric of Worthington and Nobles County. Over the last about 72 hours, started to experience increasing numbers of COVID-related symptoms. Once we got a team down there and started testing, it was led up by the Department of Health, the Department of Labor and Industry, and Agriculture. And I want to especially thank the folks down in Worthington. I was on the phone with Mayor Cooley last week, and the public health people down in Nobles County doing incredible work on this as we started to see a cluster of a very difficult disease start to spring up, doing everything right. And I think this morning JBS announced a voluntary indefinite shutdown of the facility to reassess what we can do to make that plant safe, what we can do to keep those employees safe. We have undertaken a robust testing operation, and I'm going to leave it. I think Commissioner Peterson and others will talk a little bit about this. The lessons learned in the JBS plant in Worthington are going to be applied to our other facilities, our other packing facilities across the state, because this is both numerous reasons. Obviously, the health of the workers. It's obviously the economic impact on these communities, but we have a responsibility here in Minnesota that we feed a large portion of the world. We are very much disproportionately the breadbasket of the world, and when these things start to shut down, and when you combine Smithfield and JBS, Commissioner Peterson will talk about this, it's a big portion of where our producers are sending their animals to market. So we'll hear a little bit about that. What I'd just like to, and I'll comment on this, some of you saw in last week, we had folks that are rightfully frustrated with the stay-at-home order. They gathered to express their constitutional First Amendment rights of disagreement. As I said then, though, I think there are safer ways to do that. I think in a global pandemic, we're always striking the proper balance between civil liberties and protection of a broader group of people. I mentioned last week that I was just a little confused about what we needed to do different when there was a just on Twitter from the president. So I called, the president called back on Saturday night. We had a very good and long conversation. I got the opportunity, as the president asked, what are we doing in Minnesota? What's the situation look like? I asked how we could align better with what the administration's proposals were put on Thursday, because I think they align very closely. We talked about some of the challenges around PPE and testing. But the one thing I think many of you have been in this room time and time again, I have been very clear. I am not interested in adjudicating why we don't have these things now. I'm just interested in how we get them. And that's what I expressed to the president again. I think he echoed that and expressed great desire to continue to work with us. He mentioned the great companies in Minnesota that are a part of the whole nationwide effort. And I think it just shows, and I'm convinced of this, that Minnesotans and Americans in general, they don't need to see us fight. And I'm not asking for everybody to agree with everything that's said, and I encourage people to strongly as they can, continue to debate these in a manner that makes sense. I just don't think that there's any percentage in us not being totally aligned. And I left that conversation Saturday night believing that we are aligned, we are getting this right, that there's a confidence level amongst my team here that I think we're getting into a rhythm where our partners, whether they be at FEMA, had a great conversation with Secretary Espers at the Department of Defense, and now this conversation with the President is in alignment. And I said I understand the frustrations, but I did express to the President I'm not sure that's really helpful at this point in time. And if there's anything that he needs me to do, it would be better to just call and we would talk. And I think we both agreed to that it's just not healthy to play it out in a public setting where there's not a real back and forth and the ability to exchange information. So I'm grateful for that. I think there's reasons for us to be incredibly hopeful today with COVID-4 stimulus funding. We're talking to our delegation. I will say this, that I think the areas they're focusing on heavily, which looks like small business and hospitals, especially rural or specialty hospitals, is really wise. I will have to express this, that I think governors in general express this, and this is aimed at Congress, this is aimed at our strategy in general, that we're going to have to include the states in this at some point, because states can't run and should not be able to run deficit spending. But because of this, we're backfilling a lot of help into this fight against COVID-19. And if the states are not given part of this, that you're going to have a gap there too. And I think the President and the Vice President's response to that has been that may need to be the COVID-5 piece of it. The problem is that states start to run up against this pretty quickly. I am pleased to say that they looked at states and did a stress test of which states are best prepared financially to handle this. And Minnesota was in the top 10 states. They said that is prepared to financially be able to put ourselves in a good position with our reserves, put ourselves in a good position with our ratio of spending and the stability of our pension funds. So at this point in time, good decisions in the past have put us in this position, but we certainly welcome the next discussion on what we're going to do to get Minnesota's economy back running in a safe manner. With that, I think I will bring up Commissioner Malcolm to update where we're at, and then we'll hear from Doug and Alice a little bit on procurement. Commissioner?
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. I'll once again just give you the data briefing. First of all, as of early this morning, globally, we were at more than 2.4 million cases and nearly 166,000 deaths. Again, as I've said many a time before, this is just a stunningly fast-moving virus across the entire globe. In the United States, early this morning, we were just under 760,000 confirmed cases and just under 41,000 deaths. Here in Minnesota, as the governor has mentioned, we are now at 2,470 cases, up an additional 114 from yesterday's laboratory confirmed total, and sadly an additional 9 deaths. Again, heavily concentrated, 8 of the 9 occurring in people associated with long-term care facilities, all residents again. Of the 9 deaths from yesterday, the youngest was in their 50s, a couple in their 60s, a couple more in their 70s, and the remainder 80s and 90s, the same pattern that we have been seeing. As of today, 1,202 patients have been released from isolation. There are 237 patients currently hospitalized, 126 of those in intensive care. We keep focusing on those metrics because that's been where a lot of the critical planning has been, to increase the supply, to be ready for increasing numbers as we see them. I would like to comment just very briefly on the Worthington situation, knowing that my colleagues are going to go into greater depth. But from a health perspective, as the governor mentioned, we are, as we're getting case reports coming in, confirmed cases from geographic areas around the state, we were noticing an increase in cases in Nobles County. And as the disease investigators began their process of interviewing cases and identifying contacts, we fairly quickly spotted a strong link to the JBS plant. I will say that, and I appreciate the governor's acknowledgement, that our public health colleagues locally and at MDH, and particularly the skill of the disease investigators, is truly a great asset. There are some real challenges in this particular community with the number of languages being spoken. Over 40 languages are spoken in the JBS plant. A lot of these individuals don't necessarily have ideal housing situations in the sense of they're quite mobile. The housing is quite crowded. And some of them don't have telephones. So it's been a little bit difficult to track down, and so the investigations are taking a little bit longer than they typically do. It's been a point of pride for us that we're able to complete most investigations within 24 hours of getting a laboratory report. But so far, we've completed, of the 77 confirmed cases in Nobles County as of Saturday's testing, so we don't have all the results back yet from Sunday, but of that 77 confirmed cases in Nobles County, we've completed 41 of the interviews, so still have quite a bit more to go to figure out the total number. But in that first 41 interviews, 33 of them were employees of JBS and 6 are family members of the employees. So you can see the concentration there related to the plant, which is why it's so very important that we understand and get in there and understand more clearly what's going on with the plant situation. And we know, as we've talked about before, the importance of congregate settings, whether we're talking about care facilities, housing facilities, jail facilities, or now we see and have seen around the country the potential for rapid spread in manufacturing facilities, especially ones of close quarters. So we could say more later in the briefing about the disease investigation process if you're interested, but we do appreciate the cooperation of JBS in allowing us to get a closer look at testing for the employees and families of that situation. I want to close with a bit of a good news story in a sense. You know that we've been working really hard to work closely with long-term care facilities who have large numbers or any cases. We consider, as you've heard time and again from Chris Ayersman and me, one case in a long-term care facility triggers a much closer hands-on approach from us because we know the potential with that at-risk population. We had a situation over the weekend with a particular facility in Wayzata there were a cluster of cases among staff, a few among residents as well, but we reached the tipping point where the staff was really unable to continue to care for those residents. So a decision was made Saturday morning, and by Saturday night, all 46 of the residents of that facility were relocated, either to their families on a temporary basis, to other assisted living facilities that were willing to take them. 7 were transferred to nearby hospitals to receive care. The point here was not that these relocations were triggered by resident illness, but by the lack of critical staff. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the incredibly hard work and the partnership and the teamwork that went into moving these people quickly and safely. It really took an extraordinary effort of our MDH staff, our colleagues at the State Emergency Operations Center, the Statewide Healthcare Coordinating Center, local emergency management, local healthcare providers, and other assisted living facilities that were willing and ready to be of assistance. So it was really a good news story in the sense of it was able to happen quickly, it was able to happen professionally without a lot of drama. Everyone is getting the care and the support that they need, and I am really grateful to the amount of teamwork that took. I think it just illustrates the importance of the interdisciplinary approach and the ability to move quickly when we need to. And with that, Governor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jan. I'm going to bring Doug up here in just a second, but I think it's important, again, Minnesotans understand. Every morning I have a team that breaks down all of the lanes. This lane that Doug Baker's been working in, the Critical Care Supply Working Group, is these working groups brief me. Joe Kelly briefs in the morning about where we stand across the spectrum of emergency management, to include facilities that might be potentially stood up, flooding, and everything else that's going on in the state. We go right down the line from housing to education to the commissioner briefs. But I think one of the things that when you maybe watch these briefings, it's easy to to forget there are literally tens of thousands of people carrying out this care for Minnesota that are doing all of these different pieces and working synchronization wise. And one of the things that I think sets Minnesota apart, and we keep talking about this Minnesota model, is our private sector expertise is second to none and their willingness to help. So each one of these work groups has a lead in the private sector that's helping us out with that. So in the acquisition of PPE and getting ourselves ready, that's Doug Baker from ECOLAB. Doug, thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Governor, and thank you, Commissioner. I want to open by saying thank you to everybody here. Your team, this is a tough job. It's a tough time to lead. You've got very difficult decisions to make as you go through. I think it's very clear you're working very hard to understand all the issues. I said recently, if this wasn't hard, it would be because it was misunderstood. And clearly these are difficult decisions, and we all have confidence in the business community. You're working very hard to get this right. Human health is absolutely critical, and obviously there's economic health, and these two meet, and that's not an easy line to cross and to figure out. So we empathize, and we also really appreciate all the hard work that's been going into this. I'll say this is a easy call to answer, and I was delighted we could help. I will be remiss, I'll say this 3 times. If you have a big job, you smother it with talent. I can see that the governor believes in the same ethic. That's how we have Commissioner Alice Roberts Davis here. And I would also say from our end, we asked Jill Wyant, who is repatriating from Zurich, moving into a growth and innovation job globally for me. And it's hard to grow when everybody's home. So to think that maybe her helping unlock the state, because if you don't have PPE and you don't have this stuff figured out and the reserves right, it's very hard for the governor and team to give a go-ahead ultimately to reopen the state. So this all in a lot of ways works. Jill has done a great job, but it's with the leadership of the commissioner and her team. And last I'll say is this. My big job was making the business community aware of the challenge. They volunteered, and you listed a number of them, and I'm just going to do it again. So I sent a letter out on Friday, and by Monday we had like 10 people volunteering. And what we're doing principally is using their procurement teams. So we all have offices all around the world that can buy things. We have people in China, they can inspect and buy things. This is already built. So to use this team in this instance seems a very wise way for us to help quite efficiently. The state doesn't go out and do this by nature. And so this is an emergency time where we can help in a very unique way. But 3M, Donaldson, C.H. Robinson, Mayo, Patterson, Polaris, Toro, Target, and of course ECOLAB's purchasing, all of them really stepped up in the procurement, logistics, warehousing management, whatever way they can. They've really stepped up in a number of ways. So that's all I'd have to say, and we appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Commissioner? Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Doug. As I've said before, we continue to be competing for supplies with 49 other states and many countries across the world. This has really been a very special relationship with ECOLAB. Over the past 3 weeks, we've been leveraging our traditional supply chains, but also had many Minnesota businesses step up, some small businesses that pivoted from their normal operations to assisting the state, and then, of course, what ECOLAB did, which was different. They made the call. They asked Minnesota corporations to step up. They asked them for their top talent, and they really responded. And so from all of those companies that you named, Doug, we've gotten some of their top talent, and they've been so helpful for us in vetting procurement leads and vetting vendors, which we were flooded with in the very beginning. Not necessarily all from good actors or people with good intentions for supplying the state. In fact, just this past weekend, 3M was able to quickly identify for us a vendor that was counterfeiting 3M masks and selling them, and so we were able to abandon that lead and spend our time more wisely. So we're very appreciative of all of the great work that this group has done. We're continuing to build capacity. We're placing orders daily and receiving orders daily, but there's still a lot of work for us to do in order to be prepared in healthcare settings and long-term healthcare facilities, daycares, and shelters across the state. But I am really heartened by the commitment of all of our private partners and us working together. So again, just a really heartfelt thanks to ECOLAB, to Doug, to Jill, and to all of the partners who stepped up and helped us in this effort.
I'm going to bring up two commissioners. You haven't seen much here yet, but they've been working nonstop. Nancy Leppink is the Commissioner of Department of Labor and Industry, and I think my colleagues across the country and others would say this is probably no one more talented in keeping workplaces safe, labor law, labor interactions, and having her on the scene to try and understand how we can keep these businesses running and keep employees safe is absolutely critical. And of course, Tom Peterson, Department of Agriculture. As I said, I think I go a lot of places, and every time I get there, people tell me Tom's already been there. And I feel like I know a lot of people. Tom not only knows them, he knows all their children and the dogs and cats that are with them. So these are two good people to have on the ground when it comes to an intersection between labor and agriculture. So Commissioner Leppink and Commissioner Peterson.
So good afternoon, everyone. I've been asked here today to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing in light of the cluster of cases that we have found in the Worthington area and in Nobles County. So when it appeared and became clear that a significant number of these tests were from with employees who were employed by the JBS meatpacking facility, and of course that followed on the heels of the Smithfield facility and other facilities across the country having similar challenges. First of all, and most importantly, the Department of Health and the Department of Labor and the Department of Agriculture worked to develop guidelines now for the meatpacking sector to assist them in coming into compliance with CDC guidelines in their facilities. Furthermore, we will be sending out that guidelines to all of the facilities in the state and offering the assistance of the state to help them develop the plans that are necessary and improve their operations in a manner that allows for them to comply with those CDC guidelines. We've also requested that those facilities, because often our knowledge about whether there's something going on in a facility we only learn that after we've done testing, and the testing questions ask people then, where are you employed? So we are also asking for these facilities to voluntarily share with us the health status related to their workforce. So have they had workers who have tested positive? Have they had workers who have been symptomatic and sent home? Have they had workers who have called in reporting symptoms of COVID-19? And this will allow the state then to focus its testing resources more effectively, but also that we can get into those facilities and work with those companies to help them identify and potentially change how they're operating in order to meet the CDC guidelines. So, and we know that there is significant pressure on this sector regarding the demand of the agricultural industry. So our objective is to keep these plants open, but however, to keep them open in a manner that they do so to keep their workers safe. And so that then really means that there has to be a strong collaboration between health and labor and agriculture to truly meet, to see how to thread that needle in this industry. So the department is committed to working with health and agriculture. We have amazing partnership there, but also to do our job, which is to ensure the safety and health of workers and workplaces across the state.
Well, thank you. I think for Minnesota's agricultural industry, this is obviously a very tough time, as it is for all Minnesotans. In our, COVID-19, thinking back to our farmers before we even had COVID-19, we'd faced 5 years of bad prices before this ever happened. And so to have this on top of it is very difficult, especially right now for our pork industry. And keep in mind, Minnesota is #2 in pork production in our nation. We're here to do whatever we can to support our farmers and to support the people affected by JBS's plant decision to suspend operations today. And we've been working with our Worthington Plant's leadership and the employees to help them find a way to resume those operations as soon as possible. In the meantime, I want to just say that our pork producers, we have enough pigs to meet our demand right now, but with closures of packing plants and processing facilities, it's going to make things very challenging. We also want to make sure that we reemphasize to the public that there's no evidence of food or food packaging being associated with transmission of COVID-19 and pork processing. It means it's safe to consume pork, especially using everyday safe food handling techniques. Farmers are losing money on every animal day. It's not just hogs, lamb, cattle, dairy, eggs. It's across the sector. U.S. pig farmers are estimated to lose $5 billion for the remainder of the year. We also want to say that we're doing everything we can at the Department of Agriculture to assist our producers at this time. We have assigned staff members to help farmers that have lost markets, and so farmers that are looking at that can go on our COVID-19 webpage, and we can connect them with our staff people who will do their best to help them find markets. MDA is in constant touch with the other plants that are operating within the state. We have roughly 20 other large packing companies, and our goal, as Commissioner Lepnick said and the governor said, is to keep those plants running. It's incredibly important. In the meantime, the Department of Agriculture is working with a lot of our smaller plants to build capacity within the state. Those would be what we call our equal to or custom plants. We this last week gave out $345,000 in value-added grants to those plants to increase capacity to handle those animals that we're seeing. We also want to just remind people that this is a very stressful time for our farmers, and that we have resources at the Department of Agriculture that are free for our farmers to use. We have a mental health line, and we also have 10 farm advocates. I spoke with them on the phone this morning, and we know that it's tough for farmers, but we also want farmers to know that there's resources out there to help them. And so this is a tough situation. We'll work together with our other state agencies, our other states, to get through this. We want to make sure that we ensure that Minnesotans have a safe, affordable, and accessible food supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, thank you, everyone. Doug, I go back to that smother it with talent. Minnesota has a lot of that, as you can see with these commissioners who are up here. I talk about these two who don't get up here a lot, but I talk to an awful lot. And, of course, trying to go find that talent. Commissioner Lepink was based in Zurich at the time when we were out looking for someone to fill that position, and we had to do her interview via Skype from Morocco. A native of Two Harbors wanted to come home and serve the state, and so I'm grateful for that. So with that, we're open to the questions from everyone. So, Mary?
Governor, you mentioned earlier 18 months for businesses to prepare that business will not be as usual for 18 months.
Yeah, I think that's the way they're viewing it.
Timeline comes from?
Yeah, well, they're viewing it from the outside numbers from CDC on a vaccine. I think most of us recognize behavior is not going to change dramatically until there's a vaccine. I think certainly therapeutics, Chris Erzman and some of the infectious disease experts would tell you this, but the businesses themselves are saying they're doing their work, that they understand customers and they understand customers' thinking, and they're out there looking to what it's going to take to get people back in their stores. What's it going to take to operate your restaurant once we have social distancing? But if we open restaurants without a vaccine, will people come? How will that look? So I think they're thinking, and to be honest, in speaking to this major retailer this morning, they're thinking this could be a long time or even a generational shift in how people view retail. And they're starting to think that way of what does it look like if we come back, and when we come back, are we going to approach it differently? So one of the good things, though, I think for us right now is having all that talent and having these business folks think about this. They're creating plans that are going to be solid, that will feed in, that will help us make these decisions to open up. That's what we're not going to be able as a state by ourselves in a vacuum to be able to create, this is what a safe business would look like and this is how you can make it work. We're going to have to go back and forth with them, working with health and saying this is how you do it. Exactly what you're hearing about JBS. How do you open back up a hog processing plant in a manner that stays safe and separated? Does it make sense to operate it at a slower speed, and how many hogs can you move through there? So I think that's how they're thinking, and they're looking, and I think their long-range vision is vaccine.
But to follow up, what are you thinking? How does that change your thoughts on what businesses open and when? There's a lot of pressure still on restaurants.
Yeah.
on
Well, I think it has to be driven by the science and the data. When I heard people say, if there are protocols in place that are keeping essential businesses open by the things that they're doing and not getting people sick, wouldn't it stand to logic that you could apply those to non-essential and do them the same way? And the answer to that is yes. But I think today the JBS and other situations show this. It makes no difference whether you have a stay-at-home order or not on that if people are getting infected and not able to come to work, meaning you could not have one on and it would still shut it down. So the way it impacts me is that I think day to day is what I keep telling people. We need to find out what things are working. How can we do this? And again, I don't know yet on antibody testing. I think we've talked about this, Jan certainly has, that the drawbacks of antibody testing need to be taken into account with the great potential promise of that. So we're looking long-term about what it will take, but I'm looking with this team with best practices of saying, is there a way? Because from the very first day this thing started and people were talking about shelter at home and we're talking about 18 months, I said it's not feasible to shelter in place everybody for 18 months. It is just not sustainable. It's not sustainable economically, it's not sustainable health-wise, and it's not sustainable psychologically. So we're trying to strike that balance, and I would thank Minnesotans again. I get a report on social distancing and things that are happening. We opened up a lot of activities for outdoor activities over the weekend, and almost no complaints. People were adhering to them. Now, obviously, there'll be a bit of a lag time if people are gathering too closely or we're getting spread of the disease. So we're looking at it both triaging short term, but then thinking like these businesses are, what does resumption of state business look like until we have a vaccine?
Governor, if I can ask you to go into more detail about your conversation with President Trump. The tweet, "Liberate Minnesota," certainly took, most people interpret that as a direct rebuke of you and your policies. It sounds like he may have called you back. And also, did you tell him what you thought of that tweet, and what do you think of that tweet? What was it like?
He did, yep. The president called, and we have spoken on numerous occasions. He has called on several times prior to COVID-19. I was very appreciative he would take the time and called back. It was probably close to a 10-minute conversation, and I just explained to him, I said, I know, Mr. President, you don't have time to know everybody. I said, I've been in Congress. I've served under 3 administrations or served with 3 administrations. In Congress, and I said one of the things I pride myself on was being a low maintenance member of Congress, meaning I didn't need to have the White House call on everything, that we did our homework, we did our stuff, and we worked together. And I just said that I wanted to get the opportunity to explain what we're doing to make this a little clearer. I said I understand there's frustrations with folks wanting to stay home, but here's what Minnesota's doing, and I want to understand, is there something else you'd like us to do? And at that point, the president said he appreciated that. He said, I am hearing good things. I think it should be noted that I think there were prominent Minnesotans that placed calls to the White House and said, you may talk to the governor. He's trying to get this right. And I would, if those calls were made, I certainly can't say that specifically, but it sure sounded like somebody called, because the president said, I'm hearing from friends in Minnesota that you're doing things that need to be done and you're listening to them. So I appreciate that. And so I think it was more of kind of a level setting again. The president asked about testing, and I said, we're turning to Mayo, the University of Minnesota, in our health systems across Minnesota. I said I appreciated, because this was after his news conference yesterday, I said I appreciated the Defense Production Act focusing on swabs and some of that material, because I said for whatever reason there is a little bit of a problem with that, and he said that'll be taken care of this week. And And then I just asked, I said, if we're getting something wrong here, we're getting something that, can we call or can we talk? And he said, absolutely. And he said, I appreciate this. We'll talk soon. And then I just saw this morning, they said that the president put out a tweet and said the conversation, I think he summed it up the way I would. It went very well. We committed to working together. And my talk to him is that he can tweet what he wants to, and that's right. But I said, I think here in Minnesota, they really, really want him to succeed. They really, really want our state to succeed. And I said, if we can work together, this is not an either-or proposition. And so I felt certainly better about it. I think, again, we'll see how things go moving forward. But Minnesotans should expect that that's what I'm focusing on. It made me just a little more comfortable that we're not going to get sidetracked into things that take us away from the main mission.
You mentioned that there may have been some calls on Minnesota's behalf. Can you elaborate?
You know, if I had to speculate, I think there are probably some prominent business people in Minnesota that placed some calls and said, hey, we are getting this. And when you look at it, we're following the CISA rules. And I think if you look at the 3 states, we've all 3 done it fairly differently. So the idea that there was a connection between how we are approaching this, each governor, and again, like I said, is when the president said it's up to us, I take that very seriously. Many of you sat in this room and heard me. I have not criticized or decided who's to blame for why we don't have enough of this stuff. I just said we don't have it. And then if I'm a Minnesotan out there listening, at that point in time, it becomes my responsibility. And all I'm asking for is just some partnership and help. I'll take responsibility to get these tests done and to get this PPE, but I just need a little bit of help. So my guess is that, again, I'm speculating here, but it sure sounded like, as the president did mention, that he had heard from people in Minnesota that we are listening, we are doing this, and that I am making that effort to thread the needle of opening businesses while keeping people safe. And we left the conversation. He was gracious. He spoke to my daughter, that she was there. I said, I have my children here. And he said, are they there? And I said, yes. And he said, hi to Hope. And so it was very gracious in that regards, because I think he recognized we were all sitting at home on a Saturday night, doing our things that families across the country are doing. And he asked how they were faring. So I appreciated that.
Hey, you've previously talked about significantly ramping up testing and contact tracing. Can you provide an update on what's happening on those fronts?
Yeah, and Jan, I don't want to put our team out on a spot. I think one of the things is that there were some coordination issues amongst the healthcare systems, amongst the state, and amongst what we're able to do. There have been conversations with the legislature on how to pay for this. My, I guess, guidance to my team is the preponderance of the evidence looks like to me is that we're going to have to test and retest and stay out this for a while if we really think that we're going to be able to contain pockets, do this smart work that the epidemiologists have done. I think we shouldn't kid people to think that massive testing makes everything go back to normal, but it does move us to a better place. And I have just made the challenge that everybody who's symptomatic or who may need a test should be able to get one, and that we should have enough capacity in these major employment centers to be able to go in there, drop in, and test everybody if we can. And I guess my anticipation is that this week there will be a significant change in that. But I am not going to gloss over this. We've run into issues. We run into issues with PPE. We run into some of the issues of coordinating together, but we simply have to step those up. And while last week putting out a specific number, I guess that's more for me to set a milestone. I think if you don't have something out there and measure it, then you're not held accountable for it. I think probably the experts and the health people would rather have me say everybody who's symptomatic and needs a test should be getting them easier. That's probably a fairer way, but I hope that you significantly see on the molecular tests, the front end, the PCR on the front, you see a significant increase in that. And I think most of us know is once that happens, you're also going to see a significant increase in positive cases. But the tracing piece of it is the one where Jan and her team and others are starting to build up this core to be able to get there. And I know I saw Governor Baker, Charlie Baker in Massachusetts is putting some focus on that piece of it, and we are too. And it's my intention to create this Minnesota model. It's one of the things I explained to the president. I said, I think, Mr. President, if you watch what happens in Minnesota this week, this may be the model for opening back up that others want to follow. So give me an opportunity to show this and see. And on that one, he said, well, we're watching and seeing, you're working with great people. Let's see how it goes.
Governor, you mentioned outdoor recreation was going well. You didn't know of any complaints. Any thought of outdoor sports resuming, even if school can't go back in? Do you think in terms of state high school league and the collegiate level that it's possible to have any form of collegiate or high school sports go on if the schools are not open?
Yeah, this is, and again, I just want to express, and if there's any of those athletes out there, both collegiate, high school, professional, and those, the Olympic athletes, I mean, those who even have high school athletes in their family know that so much effort and excitement is put into this, and then you're at a point where it's your pinnacle season and you're going to win a state championship, and all that was taken away. So just like many of these things, we're leaning into it hard. I don't want to set up any false expectations. I think anything you play close together where you're touching the same ball or you're in large groups, that's going to be hard. I come back to the idea that I think the things we miss the most are going to be some of the hardest things to get started again, and that's difficult for me. So at this point in time, I'm not super optimistic about it, but I think it's important for me, and when we need to make a call, and probably sometime this week I could forecast to you, we will be making a call around schools and these types of things to give people a heads up. Because we're thinking now long-term on schools, what does long-term distance learning look like? And we have some, as the commissioners and deputy commissioner over at MDE said, we've got some real wow moments in our educational plan, and we've got some real whoa that it's not, and some of these inequities are being exacerbated, and this is now going to be, this will have decades-long impact on our children with this interruption if we don't get this right. So we'll give you more this week, Mary, but I think it's unlikely, and to me, I say this as somebody who's been around and as a high school coach for all those years. This breaks my heart, and I do think this students losing contact with their classmates and losing contact with their teachers and coaches has a real detrimental effect. So for those saying, you know, the social isolation also has a physical and mental health piece, I absolutely agree with you, and that's what we have to figure out.
Today on the House floor, Senator Abler said a friend of a friend has taken their life because of this. And he said, you know, this is just devastating. Domestic abuse is up, and really thinks you need to start opening the door to more businesses in particular.
Well, and I would also say, please have two sides of this coin. I asked for increased mental health funding and was denied that last year. So I just want to be clear. I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree that the mental health crisis was there ahead of time. But again, if opening up the business were safe, we would do it tomorrow. That did no good at Smithfield. It will do no good at JBS, and there are numerous others on this. So I ask for a plan. I continue to ask people this. This is what we're doing. This is what we're asking business. Come up with a plan. Just to say open up, that's not reasonable, because we can't just open up without safeguards in place. And what Minnesota's doing different is setting clear procedural standards and protocols to try and do that. And as I said, talking with one of the nation's biggest retailers this morning, they're doing that exact thing. So I agree with them, and we've got to figure that piece out.
This is from Eric Rasmussen at KSTP TV. He asks, will all JBS workers now have access to a test for COVID-19 if they want one? And was it the governor's task force in Worthington that recommended that JBS close its plant?
Jan or anybody, or Nancy, if you want to talk on this.
I can't speak to who recommended what to whom about the plant. I know that the governor's staff, including these commissioners and I, were on the phone a couple of times with the plant. And the governor has said, and we have reiterated, it's our goal to help them open the plant safely. I think they committed their cooperation with helping encourage their employees to get tested. So yes, that is our intent, that all employees will be able to get tested. And we also want to do broader testing in the surrounding community. I think, as the governor has said, we see this as an opportunity to kind of develop our playbook for how we will respond to hotspots like this, because that is certainly one of the ways in which we can try to manage this for the long haul, is to get really focused on where we know, and as Chris has said many a time, the concentration of interactions is really what's very key. So we're, with the guidance that we're giving to increasingly specific guidance for different types of sectors for how to tailor their operations, we believe that that's going to be really key.
as
Will you
may,
be testing every single worker there? Can they have access?
Yes, we've offered that, and the company has agreed that should exist. I will say, we have a testing operation that's been up and running for several days now. Getting people to come can be a challenge. So we're looking for the support also from community leaders in Worthington, from some of these communities, to encourage their people to come and get tested. So that's an important part of the message too, that we want to test people to help them with their health. It's not a punitive thing.
and Esme, this is an interesting, if I could, I would just follow up. This is an interesting point on this, of the dynamics about this. People need the paychecks. And people want to come to work, and people know if they can't get tested. This is the thing that, and I would go back to this again. The state of Minnesota did not shut down JBS. JBS's leadership did not shut down JBS. The virus shut down JBS. Someone has to make these decisions once they're coming. We want them to be up and running. The company obviously wants them to be up and running. Their employees want them to be up and running, but it is not possible to do that in this situation. And I think as a state, anything, and that's what I keep articulating, having a clear-cut plan to test, trace, isolate, and then build plans of social distancing and new normal is our surest way to get in. I just don't know how to respond when somebody says open up tomorrow and you say how and just say do it. Nobody's going back to work tomorrow, even if the stay-at-home order's lifted. And that's the part that I just want to get this in. And it's taking time. And I want to be clear, with these companies, heartbreaking decisions. Best Buy, 51,000 furloughs last week. Best Buy's trying to figure out, a part of their business is going back in and servicing warranties for people. And your refrigerator breaks down at a stay-at-home, that's a big deal. Somebody needs to get in there, and they're trying to figure out, what does a checklist look like for the homeowner, for the service technician, and what can pass MDH's responsibility. Those are the types of things where we're working together to say, this is what a home service view would look like. And I don't see how you can get to that unless that provider, the person going into there, has been tested, that person working on the meatpacking line has been tested. I still think, again, this is why you're hearing all the swirl around this. The call with the vice president today was 1 hour about testing only. So I think the good news in this testing kind of spat that boiled up is everybody agree it needs to be done. My goal, and what I told my team's goal, is everybody gets tested. And I think Commissioner Peterson has been on the phone with the other plants, and we need to get there and be ready to do that before we end up where we're at now.
Can I follow up? This is for Forum Communications
Sure.
related to JBS. They want to know if there is a confirmed connection between Smithfield and Sioux Falls and JBS in Worthington. Do we know that yet? There's been speculation of family ties, of some
There are
family
family
members
ties.
working at both places. Do we know that, Chris, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chris Ersman, Department of Health. We know that the workers that work at JBS also, they have family members, or they go back and forth between these plants, so that there is a potential that what was in Smithfield, could have gotten to JBS. But by the same token, I want to acknowledge that we're seeing community transmission of COVID-19, and so it's difficult to pinpoint, but we do know that there's interaction amongst many of the plants in that area, and so it certainly is a possibility.
Yes.
Yes, here's a question from Jerry Burns at Mesabi Daily News. He asks, with the Worthington outbreak in mind, I'm curious if the administration will focus some of the ramped up testing capacity on baseline tests for potential hotspots. For example, testing the Iron Range communities that are home to open mining operations to determine what's already here.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jerry, for the question. Yes, I think the answer is yes on that. That's the goal. And to get anything back to a sense of moving towards normalcy, as I said again, I think the consensus, and it's not unanimous, but a consensus among the experts is testing is going to be a key component of that. And I've laid out an ambitious goal, and you see this across the country. Governors are starting to talk about this now. I happen to think Minnesota's probably as well positioned, but it's hard, and there are territorial issues, and that's my job to help try and break those down. There are the supply issues. That one, we've got good people working on that, but Jerry's point is exactly right. I mean, we should drop into Mintac and be able to test everybody who's there on the trucks, things that are happening. That gives you some assurances. And then once we have a baseline on that, knowing when people show symptomatic, We're testing them as they come through the door. We're catching fevers on that. They're being pulled over. They're giving a test. We're getting quick results. The trace team is on the spot. They're highlighting where they were in the morning. Did they fuel up with gas here? Did they pay inside? All that tough work that they do is what has to happen. So the answer is yes, that is the vision. And it needs to come fast. I get that. And I feel the sense of urgency.
I have a question here from Theo Keith from Fox 9. Theo asks, the number of tests fell, he has that in caps, last week below the level from the previous 2 weeks. We're still less than 25% from the 40,000 tests a week you want. Why are the testing numbers down, and when will we see 40,000?
Yeah. Well, Theo, thank you for the question. Soon, I hope. If we don't, we're going to be stuck in this. The other states have not quite figured this out yet. I've said it, and I said it last week when I projected. I thought sometime this week we should start to see a significant uptick. We heard that Sanford yesterday was going to do drive-through testing. They processed 97. That's not enough. That is not enough, and we're going to have to crack through those barriers to get it done. So in answer to that, Theo, my hope is as we get close to that 40,000 a week by this week, because again, the business community, the ones that really get this, know that they've got to do their work on social distancing. They know the stay-at-home order is working and shortens the time that we have to be closed, but they also know that they need to have this testing capacity to be able to do what they need to do. So I think we're breaking down some of those barriers. I think we've had all the players, and some of them are the healthcare systems. And what's the cost going to be? Who's going to pay for the cost? Who gets reimbursed? Who has the swabs to do it? Who processes it? And it's not like it's territorial or it's money related. It's the systems managing their own internal work orders and work process. And that's our job to break that down. And I think when we talked about this, it's been 10 days ago that I said I wanted the moonshot. My expectation was that within a 2-week window, because again, when I'm asking for these stay-at-home orders, Minnesotans are sacrificing to create this space to do what we've done. So this one needs to come. So in answer to that, Theo, my hope is this week.
Just to follow on his question, the president said Saturday at his news conference there was enough testing. Testing was okay. You talked to him on Saturday. Is that what he's getting you fast? I mean, did you talk to him about testing?
I did, and I want to be here because I don't think there's any percentage getting in a battle on this. For whatever reason, there is a disconnect between the states and the federal government on where this is at. And I think we may be talking past each other where both cases may be correct. And what I mean by that is that we have some of it in these private labs, but trying to get into it is hard. Some of it is fragmented where we have pieces of kits in different places. Now, I think Minnesotans and this team that put together, this is just one team, but the team that is showing where we're at did a great job of inventorying. I think probably for the first time in Minnesota's history, we pretty much know where everything's at in every hospital across the state. That was asking quite a bit of the hospitals to give up that autonomy. So I believe the federal government believes that they put a lot of this out. I think that they had a strategy to use around these labs, these 2 private sector labs, the Thermo Fisher and Roche. But what I think they maybe didn't see is that pulled from a supply chain that cut off our other labs to be able to do it. At this point in time, I think Minnesotans, and I would ask you to ask those providers and things, Minnesotans should just agree we are not testing as much as we should. And at this point in time, if I were them, I would blame both federal and state for not getting that to you. And I think if we get it, which we will, I am more than happy to give credit to the federal government for getting those things out there too. I just want to see the testing. So I think at this point in time, we're probably talking by each other a little bit. I think there's reasons to be optimistic, but no state has figured this out. No state is testing at a level that they need to yet. We need to be one of the first, if not the first, to do it. And that's what I expect to happen.
I have a question for Commissioner Peterson from Forum Communications. They want to know what farmers will specifically be asked to do while JBS is shuttered or any other processors or affected businesses.
Yeah, and that's a really difficult position. As Smithfield and JBS being closed, that can make up probably over 50% of the pork or pigs markets for them in Minnesota. And like I said, we're working on trying to find other markets or homes for those pigs. And so some plants are able to take some of those pigs. So we're working on that as well as much as we can. Farmers are also trying to slow the growth rate of those pigs as well, and to try to buy some time. We as a state are allowing farmers to hold more pigs on their farm at this time. And unfortunately, some farms may have to depopulate some pigs at a certain time as well.
Question from Jeremy Olson at the Star Tribune.
Yes.
Please provide an update on hospital inventory and procurement, especially given that we are now out of gowns in our state stockpile and hearing that hospitals are having to use alternatives because they are completely out.
Commissioner, you want, I looked at our website this morning, so
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So as far as inventory goes, as you mentioned, everything except for gowns, we do have at least a 30-day supply in hospitals and in our warehouse, as well as everything on order as well. So we continue to pursue opportunities to purchase those things. The one thing that I'll say is that it's been very difficult to find them, as we've talked about before, but continue to pursue every opportunity.
Did Jeremy say which hospital is out by any chance?
He did not. He just said hearing that hospitals are having to use alternatives because they're completely out.
We are ordering alternative or gown substitutes in order to ensure that they have something that they can wear when they're dealing with patients there. One thing that we've done as recently as today to ensure that we can better accommodate the hospitals is we've reduced the window for when they can order our supplemental supplies from 0 to 3 days to now 4 to 7 days. So now if they have only 4 to 7 days in inventory, we will replenish for them. Before we made them wait until they had 0 to 3. And so that's one effort that we're making to ensure that they have what they need in the hospitals when they need them.
Time for one more question.
If I could just ask a follow-up, I think Jan Malcolm mentioned that at the JBS plant there were people who were concerned about, or that were not coming forward for testing. Is any of that at all because people might be undocumented? And what is the state's policy when it comes to testing and finding out information from somebody on their COVID status?
Thank you, Esme. I think that that is a fact of lots of parts of the labor market, and we know that there are people who are undocumented, and that's part of their reason. And that's very much why we need to work with community leaders to encourage that. We've absolutely made it an issue that cost should not be a barrier, nor should documentation status. Certainly that requires a lot of cooperation. But it's critical to the public health that we understand who's been exposed and to keep them and their families safe. So we certainly, from a public health standpoint, are always sensitive to that issue and try to make sure that people know it is not a barrier to receiving either testing or any of our support.
Yeah, sure. We got one more, Teddy.
I know South Dakota is doing a study with hydroxychloroquine. Are we doing anything with that? And has any hospitals around here tried anything for the people that are really sick?
They have, and the hospitals and the physicians need to make the call. I have a situation of I called the sister of someone who's up in intensive care up in Duluth, and they tried a little bit of everything, including a hormone treatment that appears to be working. We are not taking part as a state in a study on that, but certainly Mayo and these other institutions are doing what they need and trying certain therapies as they get them out there. So,
One more question.
sure.
One last question from Minnesota Public Radio. Even with your reopening plans in progress, should the public and private employers be prepared for an extension of the stay-at-home order beyond May 4th?
I think what we're probably getting used to is modification of it, and that's one of the things that I think is maybe a little different on the Minnesota model if you look, and that we modified from the first stay-at-home order as new information came in, and I think our intention would be to continue to try and do that as more information comes in. The thing is that is a challenge for us right now. We've done a lot of things right. When I say we, I say Minnesotans. We've stayed home, we've social distanced for the most part. We've been able to push that curve out, but we know it's coming. And I think this is the hard part to wrap your mind around. On that state of the state, I talked to my team when we were writing the lines down, and I said, I need to tell people that there are going to be people dying. And it seems so unacceptable. It seems like we should be able to do more, but the nature of a virus like this, the nature of the way it's attacking, that's going to happen. And what I think I'm looking at is, are we seeing an anomaly in 5 days, or are we starting up that curve, and that will impact how it is. So what I would tell Minnesotans is we're always looking at the new data. We're always looking to modify. I am trying to thread a needle, as I think others are, between public safety and smart, science-based reopening with an understanding of both the economic, physical, and mental health tolls that this thing is taking. So I don't want to commit on this, but I think most of us recognize, and Mary asked it earlier with the businesses, I think most of us have come to the realization that at least until we get a vaccine, there are going to be changes and things in place. I just want to do my best to make sure that this is sustainable for Minnesotans, make sure that we're listening to the experts. And again, as I said earlier, I think the Minnesota model of testing, public-private partnerships, collaboration gives us an opportunity to do this a little differently. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank Minnesotans again for what you're doing. We're going to continue to update Doug, ECOLAB, and all the partners out there. Thank you for that. If some of you were noticing I was having trouble looking at my notes, my dog ate my glasses today, so that was my Monday. That was my Monday. He found my wife piled up all his stuff by the door like he was going to be leaving after that, but he'll stick around, but I just can't see. But I want to end with that positive story. It was out of Spring Valley, DQ down there. Somebody sent me a picture of it. The owner was masked up, gloves on, and was delivering carry out to folks. And the first person in line, the manager bought their meal for him and said, "Thank you for coming back." That person paid it forward and bought the one behind them. That went on for 141 cars through the line. And every single person paid it forward to another. If that doesn't symbolize Minnesotans' willingness to help a neighbor, maybe a small thing, certainly not frivolous. The idea of a warm summer Saturday, people were getting back out and they went out to get DQ. They did it safely, they did it social distanced, and they paid it forward to their neighbors. So thank you, Minnesotans. We'll be back here tomorrow to update you some more. So thank you. Thanks, commissioners. Really grateful. Doug, thank you.